Hiya, Whisper with the back-to-back. This time, video number 3, how to do AoE. And this is going to be a bit of a longer video, I assume. Because Mythic Plus and AoE is quite a beast to handle. There's a lot of talents to talk about, a lot of builds to talk about. Openers change a little bit, and a lot of stuff is happening. So, let's talk about it. First off, this looks like a raid build, and it basically is. If you just swap these two talents, this is a full single target build. Not much to it. So the two requirements that you always take: Carnage, Caustic. Carnage and Caustic, these are the two passives you will always take. Always. I cannot stress this enough. You always take these. Not taking these is troll. Caustic is basically Blade Flurry from Outlaw Rogue, but for nature damage. The tooltip on this is a little bit misleading, not gonna lie. They could have done a better job with the tooltip. It says using Mutilate. Ambush also works. That's the first important thing. Ambush works on this. You don't have to force yourself to Mutilate. If you get a blindside proc, you can ambush. It'll still refresh it perfectly fine. You need to have Rupture and Deadly Poison on the target, and you'll be good to go from there. From there, it says Caustic Spatter causes 45% of your poison damage dealt to splash onto nearby enemies. Also kind of wrong. It's all nature damage. So that includes Envenoms, that includes Poison Bomb dealt to the Caustic target. It includes the tier set, the 4-set bonus, damage dealt, again, to the Caustic target. It would include Vicious Venoms, which is additional damage as nature. It would include Sepsis. What else does nature damage? I'm forgetting. Obviously, it would do poisons. Envenom would cleave. Tier set Poison Bomb. Yeah, it's basically all of it. Anything that does nature damage would cleave, basically. So that's an important factor. So you can essentially, for the sake of reason and logic, you can think of it as identical to Blade Flurry. It just, when you hit the target, most everything you do will splash damage. Because in general, you're going to be spamming Envenom, you're going to be autoing for poison damage. So for the sake of argument, everything is just cleave. That being said, you might have noticed some stuff in AoE. For example, if you've done dungeons before as Assassination, you might have noticed that your Kingsbane target dies before your Kingsbane finishes. And that could happen a lot of the time. So we have to talk about accelerating our opener. I didn't cover this in the opener section for single target because it's a little bit finicky, but in AoE this is really important. I don't think for single target openers you super need to know it, but I'm gonna make a raid video talking about some bosses and I'll talk about it then. In AoE though, holy hell, our opener is way too long to properly do things. So the full correct opener, if you were to also take Crimson Tempest, for example. So if you look away, don't do this. This isn't a real talent build. But if you take Crimson Tempest on top of all of this, for example, right? Then what you would be looking at is you'd be looking at Garrote, Rupture, Slice and Dice, Rupture on the targets that don't have Rupture, pick a target, build your Envenom, Deathmark, Shiv, Shadowdance, Kingsbane, Garrote, Envenom, refresh the Caustic, get your Tempest out, keep the Envenom up, Shiv, T, Vanish, keep the Caustic up, Garrote, Rupture, right? So by the time the cooldown's finished, we're already a solid, how long was that? 30 seconds into the fight. And if you're doing 20s, if you're doing 18s, if you're doing anything lower than like a 24, everything's gonna be dead by then. I'm just calling it how it is. Things don't live that long. Especially not your Kingsbane target that you're cranking. And you can tell, if I pull it up, the correct one. Kingsbane did a good amount of damage. This is the 5-second one. It's details. I hate how it does this. Gonna be honest. It's resetting constantly. I know I could use overall dynamic, but I'm not used to it, so whatever. But here, Kingsbane in this time frame did 1 million, and then there's also the ticks afterwards, right? That did another 600,000. So realistically, with all of the Envenoms you're pumping in and the Kingsbane and stuff, you'd kill like a 7-8 million health mob pretty much on your own. And that's a problem, because you want your Kingsbane to caustic spatter. So, what can we do to solve this issue? Well, the first thing that we can do is we can look at our talents. And this is going to be a longer conversation. There are a lot of builds. So this one, for example, is called Arterial Shock. I have this build on Wowhead. And the way this works, technically it's this, the way this works is you don't take Dragon Temper Blades. You put a lot of your emphasis on bleed damage, so for example, Sense of Blood, Sudden Demise, Improved Garrote, Shrouded, right? All of this stuff is bleed damage, Zoldyck is bleed damage, Arterial is bleed damage, bleed, 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 blah, 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 blah. Cool. And so this takes a lot of the damage out of Kingsbane, which means that you don't need to ramp as much. You don't have as many poisons going, right? So no ramp really, or less. You still have the ramp, you still have caustic, but the ramp is less. So the way you'd play this is very similar. You would just spread your Garrotes out. You'd spread your Ruptures out. You can see the set stacks, right? So you want to get your set stacks up. That's fine. Add-on failures are fun. I'm just going to disable this for now. We'll talk about it without the add-on, because I can't cast abilities when it does that. Anyways, so right, you get your Garrotes out, you get your Ruptures out, and you'll want to maintain your scent stacks, get your Slice and Dice up, get your Crimson Tempest out, and then same thing as before, right? You're still gonna want to get your Kingsbane going. You still want to maintain all of your bleeds. It's all the same for the most part, but the big difference here is your Kingsbane damage is going to be a lot lower. And you can see that, right? It's all bleeds up top. Big Sanguine Blades, big Crimson Tempest, Garrotes, Ruptures, right? Big bleeds. So that's one way to take a lot of the bite out of out of Kingsbane and out of the ramp. So this has been something that people have been playing successfully. Or you can go the other way with it. So the other way that people have been going is actually just straight up dropping Sense of Blood and Sudden Demise, because Sense of Blood also is ramp. And instead of that, you can legitimately just go into a raid build. So this is a raid build at this point. You'll see that the similarities are striking to a single target build, but you're just taking Carnage and Caustic. So I just was talking about the strengths of Arterial, the Arterial Shock build, taking Sudden Demise, for example, for bleed damage, and taking ramp out of Kingsbane. So if I said that we're taking ramp out of Kingsbane and making our opener faster, why are we leaning into Kingsbane now? Well, we have less bleeds to put up, right? We don't have Sense of Blood, so we don't need to rupture everything. So the way that this handles it, it's more single target focused, but it handles the ramp time in a different way. Instead of focusing on bleeds instead of the ramp, it focuses fully on the ramp, and so it gets into the cooldowns faster. And you can see that if you just Garrote, Rupture, right? And then you go Slice and Dice. You don't even need to Envenom here. We'll talk about that more later. But if you just Envenom and go into your cooldowns here, you'll see you go into your cooldowns much quicker than earlier, right? Earlier was like 30 seconds. Here we're like basically halfway done with our ramp, and it's 15 seconds in. 20 seconds in almost, right? So we saved almost 10 seconds here by going into our ramp earlier. And it still does respectable damage, right? It's a lot of Kingsbane, a lot of tier set, a lot of Caustic. You can see the poisons are a lot lower. We're not taking Crimson Tempest, so we don't need to get that up, right? It's just a lot faster getting into the cooldowns. So those are two ways to kind of deal with it. But we can go even faster if we need to. And this is the concept of accelerating your opener. The idea being, yes, it would be ideal if we got all of our bleeds up, we picked a caustic target, and then we got a big Envenom, 5 combo point Envenom, we went Deathmark, Shiv, Shadow Dance, Kingsbane, Garrote, Envenom, right? It would be fantastic if we had time to do that. But if your Kingsbane is 14 seconds long, and the target dies 8 seconds into that 14-second Kingsbane, no one's gonna care that you did a perfect prep into the Kingsbane. No one cares, right? If you're gonna do a perfect ramp into your Kingsbane, and your Kingsbane doesn't live the full duration, no one gives a shit. No one's gonna sit there and go, oh, you did real great ramping into it. So what we do is we just throw our hands up and say, YOLO, just throw the cooldown out. What that would look like is legitimately, like what you could do is you could just Garrote, Rupture, pick a caustic target, and then just go. And you can deal with everything else later. You don't need to get your Envenom up immediately, right? You just go. You just send it, right? Make sure you keep your caustic up. I obviously didn't here, but you just full send it. As hard as you go. Like you just get your Garrotes out, you get one set of Ruptures out, you just go. You just get it out. Get the cooldown out as soon as you can. Just rush it out. And it might be less Kingsbane damage, right? Your Kingsbane in total might only do 1.2 million instead of 1.8. But if it lives for the entire duration and you get that full 1.2 out, you're good to go, right? If you would have lost all that damage to the target dying, then that's not damage you would have had to begin with. It doesn't matter how good the quality of your Kingsbane is if it doesn't last, right? If the target dies before it finishes, you lost all that damage. You lost that perfect opener, right? So in general, if you're encountering situations where your targets just die, try some of those steps, right? Maybe change your talents around to focus either one way or the other. This can be especially potent if you go more of an arterial-like playstyle, right? If you do something like this instead. If you go something like an arterial playstyle, this build, we'll just look at this build, and then you also combine that with the concept of slamming your Kingsbane out, right? Just throwing it out as it comes up, you still get good priority damage, you still get the caustic damage, and you get the bleed damage. So you get the best of all the worlds combined, right? So that's something to think about. The other thing I want to talk about is the power of getting rid of Crimson Tempest. So there's multiple ways to do this. You can do this on any build at all. Wowhead has 4 Mythic Plus builds. One of them takes Acro, it's called Utilitarian. This would be considered the arterial build. And then you can also go this way, which would be considered hybrid. So this is called hybrid because it kind of focuses on both bleed and poison. And then you have the opposite of hybrid, which would be considered the sort of raid build, right? So like this was called cleave. So you have certain combinations you can deal with. So this is a raid build, right? If you move these points out and go here, this is more of a hybrid setup. And if you say hell to the poisons, we're just going, this would be arterial, right? You would do something like this because you don't have the second poison. And on all of these builds, you can get rid of Crimson Tempest. We only use Crimson Tempest on 4 or more targets, and that is because our tier set, if I pull it up on one of these, this one for example, our tier set does a lot of damage. And that is not to say that Crimson Tempest is bad. Crimson Tempest is very good. However, if it's too slow and your targets are dying, again, Crimson Tempest only does damage if it has time to tick. if your target dies and Crimson Tempest is not able to tick, it's not gonna do damage. So instead of that, drop the Crimson Tempest, put it into anything else. Usually improved poisons is the best way to go about it. If you're a psychopath, you can put it into Fatal Concoction. I don't know why you would do this, but you could. But typically you put it into improved poisons, and then you would just Envenom, right? So in any place where you would Crimson Tempest, you would Envenom instead. And typically this is fine. This is even better in Cleave because you wouldn't Crimson Tempest below 4 targets anyways. So that's something to keep in mind. On higher keys, people have been playing the Cleave build, which is like this. Boop, boop, boop. So they've been playing something like this, which is very raid focused, very single target focused, leans a lot into Caustic Spatter, and they don't even take Crimson Tempest. Even though the pulls would last long enough, because they're just relying on the tier set to do the AoE, and then they're cranking the hell out of the boss. That's the entire point. The entire point is me do cryo damage, me do single target boss damage, ooga booga, big burst, right? Cool. If you would want to, if you're so inclined, there is another way to play this, like as a psychopath, which would be to drop this and take Crimson Tempest. For any normal human, this is insane. You might see this simulate higher. You might see it in a spreadsheet somewhere. You might see it on some build that someone uses. This is a crackhead build. You are giving up the single target of Amplifying Poison and Fatal Concoction, which was sort of the entire idea of your build, and you're giving up some of your Caustic Spatter damage, which again was the entire idea of the build, and you're putting it back into Crimson Tempest, which is just... it's such a juxtaposition that, to me, even hypothetically as a theory crafter, in theory, in simulations, this makes no sense to me. It might simulate very well. It might even do practical damage. I'm not saying it doesn't, but this is psychotic. So I would never suggest this because you're going against the grain of what you're trying to do. If you're gonna build into bleeds, just build into bleeds. This is arterial at this point. Right, this is just the arterial build. If you're gonna play a Cleave build like this with Dragon Tempered Blades, just take Amp Poison. Like you're playing into the strength, right? You don't want to play into your weaknesses and then just shore up your weaknesses the entire time. Play into what you're strong at, right? Like try to exploit what you're strong at and be good at that, rather than trying to be everywhere all at once. It's so weird. It's so weird. This looks real weird to me. But the fact that this works should tell you that really you can do whatever the hell you want to. I'm gonna be honest. I have 4 builds on Wowhead. I've shown you 4 builds, 5 builds in here. Truly, you can do whatever you want to, and it'll be fine, as long as you take. Let me get rid of points. As long as you take these points, you're basically good to go. So you have to take this cluster here, right? Bloody Mess, Caustic, Improved Garrote, Sanguine, Master Assassin. You can get rid of this. It's a really good point though. So Master Assassin, Iron Wire for the utility. This cluster of 6, Shrouded, Indiscriminate Carnage, Kingsbane. As long as you take these cluster points, like these 9 points, every build works. I'm gonna be honest, every single build works. Like I said, a lot of people have been playing into the strength of the Cleave build, like so. But if you feel like Crimson Tempest is really good for you and you want to be psychotic, play Crimson Tempest. No one's gonna stop you. Arterial, still a very good build. Lots of people play this. Lots of people enjoy it. Lots of people having success with it. Do that. If Crimson Tempest is too slow for you, get rid of it. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. As long as you keep the ideas and the concepts from your opener in your head, and you accelerate as needed, you should be good to go. Make sure you keep Caustic up on one target, right? You always want to make sure you keep Caustic up, and then you get your Envenoms off. If you can get your Envenoms in tier, even better. You can see tier, big damage, Caustic, big damage. And that's just how AoE works. You are the priority nuke. Your target should die. So if it does, you're doing your job. You just want to make sure that you're also doing AoE while you're at it. Demon Hunters and Hunters will have more than enough burst in AoE to wipe you off the board. So I wouldn't worry about that too much, but play around with it. Mythic Plus is not a very hard set rule. It's not content that you can just apply every rule to every time. You have to vary your gameplay depending on the situation. A lot of that is just done by feel. So while I have some rules and some methods that you can apply to your gameplay, it's up to you to really pick the right tool for the right job, right? That's all that's all I can give you, right? From there, you just have to make your own decisions on what works best for you. So anyways, I hope that helped. And hopefully your AoE is going to be a lot better. Because I've seen a lot of people struggling with it. Anyways, bye!